asking for you to vote with me for positive reasons, regardless of which party you voted for in the past. Because this is a time for serious leadership of a united country. We need to come together so we can fight President Trump together. We can control our economic destiny with the right plan. Because in a crisis, plan beats no plan. And to succeed in a crisis, you need to act with overwhelming force, to overcome the anxieties that people naturally feel, to break through the fog of uncertainty that businesses face, and above all, to replace what the crisis is taking away. In a crisis, as the private sector retreats, government needs to step up to provide direction, to drive action, and catalyze investment. And that's what our plan to build Canada strong will do. Building Canada strong in the face of the Trump tariffs begins with building housing that is affordable. Sur la question de logement, mon gouvernement
For the question of housing, my government will inaudible. We have an objective to build 500,000 of housing per year, twice as many as today. It's the most ambitious plan since the Second World War.
Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in. Homes made using Canadian ingenuity, Canadian labor, Canadian products, including softwood lumber and mass timber. Houses that are Canadian to the core. The first part of our plan is to create an entirely new entity, Build Canada Homes, to develop new affordable housing projects. We're going to get the government back into the business of building affordable homes and provide billions of dollars in financing for affordable home builders. And we will catalyze a whole new housing industry with BC technology, BC skilled workers, and BC lumber at the center of it. Our ambitious housing plan will also cut the development charges in half for multi-unit housing. That's about $60,000 off the average apartment in Vancouver. We'll bring back the multi-unit residential buildings tax incentive, which when it was originally introduced in the 70s spurred tens of thousands of rental housing units across the country. Pour inciter les promoteurs immobiliers,
We'll bring back the tax break for residential buildings, rental buildings, which in the 1970s enabled us to build tens of thousands of units.
All of these actions don't just build houses. They build economic strength at home, and they build negotiating leverage with the Americans. Now, while we're building homes, we also have to build safety at home. Misguided American policies backed by President Trump are not only threatening our economy, they're also threatening the safety of our communities. Criminals are taking advantage of irresponsible American gun laws and their weak border enforcement to bring illegal guns into Canada. So we're taking action. While criminals are trying to illegally import guns from the United States to Canada, Pierre Poilievre is trying to import US-style gun laws to our country. But you can't be serious about being tough on crime if you're not willing to be tough on guns. You can't be serious about stopping intimate partner violence without being serious about gun control. We are not America. We are Canada, and we are serious. If elected, my government will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of violent offenses, including intimate partner violence. We will strengthen firearm licensing and invest in labs to increase our capacity to track down guns used in crimes. We will reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, not the gun industry. In contrast, Pierre Poilievre has voted against every single gun control measure in his decades-long career in the House of Commons. And crucially, we will also help tackle the toxic drug crisis head-on. because we know that the current approach isn't working. Fentanyl has taken far too many lives, far too soon, here in BC and across Canada. We need solutions, not slogans. That's why our plan is to disrupt the supply chain, to penalize those responsible for peddling drugs and disgracefully profiting off the pain and suffering of others, and to better support the loved ones dealing with the addiction. We will help stem the tide of drugs coming across the U.S. border by recruiting 1,000 more RCMP personnel and 1,000 more Canada Border Service agents, officers. We
will help the police confiscate contraband, including fentanyl, in Canada Post mail. We will reinforce the Canadian force to ensure that those who take advantage of crime are brought to justice.
We're adding $500 million to the Emergency Treatment Fund to support municipalities, Indigenous peoples, and community healthcare organizations to confront the toxic drug crisis head on, and to connect more people to treatment and vital services faster. We're also establishing a permanent youth mental health fund that will provide 100,000 young people every year with mental health care. Because mental health and addiction are deeply interlinked. We need to tackle the sources of this crisis, not just the symptoms. We
need to make sure that young Canadians stay far from criminality. We need to ensure that they have everything they need to stay healthy and succeed at school, which is why the daycare programs, school lunches, and dental care, and the building of affordable housing are so important. We also need to direct young people towards real opportunities for success. We will do that by supporting programs and Indigenous initiatives that enable them to do so and create good careers and specialized careers by investing in training.
With our plan, we'll ensure that Canadians are safer, that our borders better protect us from guns, from crime, and toxic drugs. We will end the housing crisis while building an entirely new industry based on BC technology, skilled workers, and lumber. We will build Canada strong. And with that, I'd be pleased to take your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll start with the media delegation for 15 minutes. Laurence?
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Carney. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada.
Hello, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Mr. Carney, why did you say that Mr. Trump respected the sovereignty of Canada when actually he did bring up the 51st state? Let's be clear. I am always clear with everybody, in public or in private, including the president, who brought up that question, that this would never happen, and the president and I, we agreed that Canada and the U.S. will start negotiations when it comes to our economic relationship and safety by being a sovereign nation after the election. And the comments of the president yesterday underlined the importance of the choice of Canadians next Monday in the election. So who can and who will stand up to President Trump.
Qu'est-ce que vous lui avez répondu à Monsieur Trump?
But what did you answer Mr. Trump during that call when he talked about the 51st state? Well, I tell everybody, and including President Trump, that this will never happen.
Prochaine question.
To be clear, as I've said to anyone who's raised this issue in private or in public, including the president, that it will never happen. And the president and I, when we spoke, we agreed that Canada and the United States, as sovereign nations, would begin negotiations on our economic and security relationship following the federal election. And I think the president's comments yesterday and before that just underscore how important the choice that Canadians have on Monday, who can stand up to President Trump, who can build Canada strong, who has the experience in order to do that. That's the crucial choice that Canadians need to make.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. Carney. Ashley Burke, CBC News. On March 28th, did President Trump bring up the idea of Canada becoming the 51st state during that call with you?
As I just said, the president brings this up all the time. He brought it up yesterday. He's brought it up before. There's a difference between a conversation that was held between leaders of government, which was this conversation, and a discussion that led directly to an agreement that as sovereign countries, we would have negotiations about our partnership following the election on Monday. That's what the president and I agreed. That's what both of us reported back. And that's what I'm ready to do. And what's at stake in this election is how well we come together as a country for those difficult discussions with the Americans. And to be clear, you know, I have said well before that call and virtually every time that I've spoken since that call, that President Trump, the Americans, want to break us so they can own us. Those aren't just words. That's what's at risk. That's why we have to build Canada strong. That's why we have to go hard. That's why we have to negotiate properly. That's not why we have to build outside options. That's why we have the plan that we do.
I asked you about this on March 28th after the call, and you said that President Trump respected Canada's sovereignty both privately and in his public conversations.
He did.
Were you being truthful?
He absolutely did. He absolutely did. Look, the president has certain things in his mind that he reverts back to all the time, but treated me as the prime minister, not as something else. I'm not even going to say the word he used to use about my predecessor. Treated me as the prime minister. We had discussions as sovereign nations. We agreed as sovereign nations that these negotiations will begin after the election on Monday. And that is how it was reported back, and that's absolutely accurate. So that's the treatment. Now, look, the president says lots of things, but the essence of the discussion and where we moved the conversation to was exactly what I said. Treated us with respect as a sovereign nation. We have these negotiations coming, and that's, just to be clear, that is what's at stake. Both things are true. The desire of the Americans and the president to own us, those aren't just words. That's a desire. And the ability of Canada to stand strong, build our own, control our destiny, and in that context, as a sovereign nation, have those discussions.
Prochaine question. Next question. In respect to your colleagues, next question.
C'est presque la même question, en effet.
It's actually the same question.
C'est déjà traduit, je crois.
This is already translated already.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Mackenzie Gray with Global
Yeah.
News. I think you've ducked Ashley and Laurence's question, so I just give you one opportunity again.
All right, so
Yes.
we're listening into Liberal leader Mark Carney. He's at an event in Coquitlam, British Columbia, outside Vancouver on day 33 of this campaign, with only about 4 days to go. Questions about Donald Trump, which of course have dominated a lot of this campaign, and Trump's respect or lack thereof for Canadian sovereignty.